India is one of the fastest growing economies in the world.
Ours is the first generation that believes that in our lifetime, India could be a developed nation.
It is one of the youngest nations in the world. 500 million Indians are under the age of 25.
If you walk around the office right now, you're going to find a fairly young workforce who are energetic, who are passionate about what they're doing.
India is flaunting its wealth, even as it struggles to help its poor.
Politicians are continually reminded that it's not good enough to talk about growth unless you can say, well, and you know what I mean by growth because your life is getting better.
Tonight we explore India's promise.
This is a special edition of Nightly Business Report, India's Promise, featuring NBR Washington Bureau Chief Darren Gersh. Nightly Business Report is made possible by
A.G. Edwards. Objective financial advice can help make sure your nest egg is ready when retirement arrives. A.G. Edwards, fully invested in our clients.
Franklin Templeton Investments, providing a unique perspective through the specialized investment expertise of Franklin Templeton Mutual Series and Fiduciary Trust. Franklin Templeton Investments, gain from our perspective.
This program was made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm standing at the Taj Mahal, one of India's most enduring landmarks. Its construction was the fulfillment of a promise by an emperor to his dying wife. Now, more than 300 years later, India is ready to construct a more promising economic future. Tonight, we explore India's promise, its hopes to become one of this century's economic superpowers. These are the new landmarks of India, an expensive suburb of Mumbai, an upscale shopping mall in Delhi, a software park in Bangalore. Driving this growth are the new emperors of the Indian economy, a rising generation of entrepreneurs. Sanjay Kapoor was having fun as a banker, but he thought he'd have even more fun in the fashion business.
So this is a light Indian wedding outfit. This is what the girl wears, like a skirt. And that's like a stole that she wears over it and a bikini top.
Yeah, and you said
Just feel how, it's kind of...
Wow!
And that's not a heavy piece.
This must weigh 15 pounds.
Yeah, probably.
So Kapoor traded in his pinstripes, tapped some private equity funds, and Genesis Colors was born.
This is a country of entrepreneurs. I mean, if 10 years ago I told my dad I'm quitting my job in Citibank to set up a fashion business, I don't think he would be very happy. Neither would he think that I would be successful in a non-orthodox business.
Think of India, and software and offshore services come to mind.
You'll always find somebody working.
But Western-trained entrepreneurs like Kapoor are now pushing India's growth in high-end manufacturing, design, and retail. The Indian fashion industry was a disorganized collection of small family businesses. Then Kapoor brought in a corporate structure and bought up famous Indian labels like Sacha Paul.
Last couple of years, we're doing about 100% year-on-year growth. That's the minimum we expect to maintain.
Unlike other Asian tigers, India's economy is driven by consumption, and consumption is soaring. 50 million Indians are considered middle class, earning between $4,000 and $20,000 a year. And salaries in IT and offshore business services are rising at double-digit rates. That's bad news for employers who complain about skill shortages and rising costs. But it's good news for retailers.
The youth of today is not worried about saving. If I'm making 80,000 rupees a month, I want to spend 80,000 rupees a month because I feel in the next year my salary is going to go up by 40%. And so, hey, why save? There's always a future ahead of you. There is a consuming class which is out there spending, wanting to look good, wanting to feel good, which is what I call the feel-good factor.
Indians want to feel good about their homes too, and rising incomes have set off a nationwide building boom. Real estate investment fund managers like S. Srinivasan say financial deregulation has helped unlock a new market.
The entire offshoring industry and the services industry in general has now created a vast pool of white-collar employees who are bankable.
So do present your American Express card as the most favored mode of payment.
And young. More than half of India's population is under the age of 24. Soon, India will be the most populous nation in the world. Now, for perhaps the first time, that's seen as a strength.
As the rest of the world ages, the world's workforce will be in India.
We use a very modern print, but traditional work on a modern style.
At Genesis Colors, the new Indian economy and the new Indian workforce come together seamlessly.
If you walk around the office right now, you're going to find a fairly young workforce in their late 20s who are energetic, who are passionate about what they're doing. Okay, because they feel there's a sense of ownership in what they're doing, which is great, which is what I think this country needs.
Of course, there are many other things India needs to thrive, and here's where the growth story frays. Corruption is rising. Government reforms are excruciatingly slow. Entrepreneurs like Kapoor must provide their own electricity and water. Infrastructure bottlenecks are pushing up inflation, sparking concerns the economy is overheating. A land rush for prime retail space has driven up rents, putting margins under pressure. Skeptics say these are all reasons growth in India will come down from a blistering 9% a year to a more sustainable 7%. What is clear, say business leaders like Microsoft India Chairman Ravi Venkatesan, is that India will be transformed.
I think ours is the first generation that believes that in our lifetime, India could be a developed nation. Okay? That sense of possibility wasn't there 5 years and 10 years ago. And that's because I think for the first time there's confidence, there's pride, as Indian institutions have become globally successful. So people believe we can do it.
This final garment that gets made will probably sell for $10,000.
Sanjay Kapoor is certainly not lacking in ambition. He wants his company to do what other fashion labels have done, create a global luxury powerhouse. Louis Vuitton meets Satya Paul.
One can develop into accessories, into fragrances, into lifestyle living, you name it, there's plenty of things to do.
Information technology services is one of the most remarkable triumphs of Indian entrepreneurship. And the man who has done the most to promote India's promise in a wired world is Nandan Nilekani, co-founder of Infosys. From its campus in Bangalore, Infosys designs and delivers IT services to companies around the world. After building Infosys into a global competitor, Nilekani will step down as CEO in June. What do you see coming up for Infosys in the next 5 years? What services are you most excited about that Infosys might provide?
It's really up to our ability to imagine what can be done that's limiting here. And it's important to imagine looking at the trends. It's to be able to say the way technology is moving today, 5 years from now, this will be so powerful, or this will be so cheap, or this will be so fast. And therefore, is there something that we can do 5 years from now using the power of this which we can't do today?
You know, we used to be told when people talked about offshoring that the things that couldn't be offshored were face-to-face services. And then I visited a company here in India that's providing tutoring services to kids all over the world and in the United States, face-to-face, over the internet. So which is it? Are we going to see face-to-face services, more face-to-face services delivered from India?
I think the term to use is, I wouldn't say face-to-face, I would say things that require a physical presence. You can't have a haircut done remotely. And there's a lot of things which are not fungible, they're not really doable over a wire. But the act of tutoring is, I think, can be done on a wire because it's ultimately about teaching and so forth. And the other thing which is happening is also because of the bandwidth going up. Now we're actually getting to a point where you can establish that kind of rapport and connection over the network. So things that earlier required close collaboration are now also becoming possible.
So how big is the opportunity for a company like this going forward?
It's big. I mean, today, we're talking about India has IT and BPO services, all this whole category of knowledge services at about $30 billion. And the expectation is that it will double to $60 billion in the next 3-4 years. So that gives you a sense of the scale of the opportunity.
Since I've been here, I've heard two things about India. On the one hand, I hear limitless pool of very talented, good people. On the other hand, I hear talent shortage, salaries going up, not enough people. Which is it?
It's both. And I think it all depends on the prism through which you're looking at this, because look at it in terms of graduates or people who have engineering skills. Now, clearly the numbers have gone up, and today we're talking about 500,000 engineering graduates. That's a pretty big number by any global standard. But then there's the whole issue of how good is the quality. You know, how relevant is the education they've got? Have they been, exposed to the latest technology? Has the curriculum been, appropriate to today's needs? And then then you find that you have to dig into that.
Some of the business leaders I've spoken with and the policy analysts who follow India say that they've seen India get ready to take off before, but it just doesn't move that fast. It gets to the runway, but then it doesn't take off, doesn't move quickly. What do you see? That's
true. But I think a variety of things have happened which has put India in the takeoff mode. And that's fairly clear. I mean, it's whether the economy is growing, whether it's the rise of entrepreneurial companies, the free economy, the open society, which is now becoming more and more obvious, the English language skills, the demographic benefits. There's a whole slew of things which indicate that this is for real. This is not a mirage. Having said that, can we declare victory? Obviously not. Because while you're able to get the growth is going to lead to income inequality, is going to increase the stress between those who are successful and those who are not. So I think the way to look at it is, it's certainly taken off, but there's a lot more to be done to keep it in the air.
As the India of gleaming office parks takes off, the other India worries it is being left behind. 800 million people here survive on less than $2 a day. They live in places like this Delhi slum, a squatters' camp built on government land. Rama Devi came here 14 years ago. After a 2-year wait, she now has electricity and a new refrigerator. But she still doesn't feel like she's getting ahead.
The agricultural labor from the villages comes here, and then because there are too many, there's not enough work for everybody. Because my son had no work and fell ill, I have sent him back to the village to be with my sister.
Employment is growing in IT and software services, but those are skilled jobs, out of reach of the vast majority of the 14 million Indians who enter the workforce every year. The poor people we spoke with also complain prices for basic goods are rising. This man says the price of limes has doubled in the last year, but not his income.
Nothing is happening for the poor man. What's happening for the poor man?
The growing inequality has helped fuel a violent Maoist insurgency across the heartland of India. It is the most dramatic sign of economic discontent. But there are others. This man says the people he knows aren't being helped by the call center jobs sprouting up around Delhi.
It's only the rich people who are benefiting. Every morning these people go to work. Some of these are employed, some are not employed. Rich people exact a lot of work from these poor people, but they don't pay them sufficient money.
The Indian government is responding. It has ramped up spending on education and infrastructure. The power lines in this Delhi slum are new. Montek Singh Ahluwalia is deputy chairman of the commission that crafts the government's economic plans. He doesn't think the discontent will derail reform.
But it is a tempering factor. Politicians are continually reminded that it's not good enough to talk about growth unless you can say, well, and you know what I mean by growth because your life is getting better.
Life is getting better for many in this Mumbai slum. The government is encouraging developers to buy land to build high-rises here. Displaced slum dwellers get new apartments on the lower floors. And in return, the developers sell the top floors to Mumbai's growing middle class. Jacob Wadagle lives here with his wife and 3 children.
Right now we are staying in this type of slum where there is no privacy. Very small areas, living area is very small.
Construction will begin here soon, and Wadagle will trade in the 100-square-foot home he owns for twice the space.
Our life standard will improve. That's why we are very happy.
Outside the big cities, the economy hasn't changed much at all. 6 out of 10 Indians rely on agriculture for most of their incomes, and agriculture is growing just 2% a year. This farmer says the price of corn is up, but there is no water for irrigation and no help from the government. But not everyone wants to trade a more traditional life for the chance of making it big in the city.
Going there and working there for 12 hours, 8 hours under some other people's control, we don't like that.
And many of those who have left the village seeking a better life in the city say they haven't found it.
Yeah, it's still better than life back in the village. A lot of us come here to work as laborers, but after coming here and working, our life hasn't really improved. In terms of being able to feed ourselves and move ahead in life, there's been no improvement in that.
The Indian government believes the lives of the poor are getting better. And as economic growth accelerates, millions will climb the ladder from poverty to the emerging middle class. I spoke with Indian Finance Minister P. Chidambaram about the government's perspective on India's rapid growth. Your budget laid out a policy goal of faster, more inclusive growth. I have to tell you that the poor people that we spoke to say they're not sharing in that growth, and the prices that they're paying for the food that they eat, for limes, for lemons, for apples, for grains, are all rising faster than their incomes. What is your government doing to address their concerns?
These are supply side constraints. Part of it is the fallout of high growth. People are consuming more. Per capita income is rising at about 6% a year for the last 4 years. Supply is not growing as fast as demand. There is a supply-demand mismatch, which is what triggered inflation in the last quarter of the previous calendar year. But it's quite obvious for anyone who travels extensively in rural India that in many, mark my word, not all, in many parts of rural India, life today is better and a little more livable than what it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago.
Are you concerned there may be a backlash against fast growth here in India?
If there is inflation, yes. But if inflation is contained, I don't think there will be a backlash. The goal, therefore, is to maintain high growth even while moderating inflation. The tolerance level for inflation has come down in India. That's a good sign. There was a time when people were tolerating, grumbling and tolerating 8 to 10% inflation. Today, the tolerance level has come down to about 5%, maybe less than 5%, which puts governments on notice.
The International Monetary Fund recently said that there is an increased risk that the Indian economy is now overheating. Is the Indian economy overheating?
Overheating is a misunderstood and misused word. What is overheating? In some sectors, credit growth is indeed higher than what we would like it to be, especially commercial real estate, housing loans, personal consumption loans. In these sectors, we would like credit growth to moderate. But certainly, if the infrastructure sector grows at a clipping pace, or if sectors like steel and mining and petroleum grow at a clipping pace, and there's a much higher rate of growth of credit to these sectors, why should anyone call it overheating? These add to capacity, these add to production, these add to jobs. There's no reason to call that overheating.
Well, as you know, one of the biggest business complaints about India is infrastructure. The roads, the water, the electrical systems are all under heavy-duty strain. Is India investing enough, fast enough in infrastructure?
Not enough. We can only invest what we can afford to invest. I concede that we are not investing as much as in infrastructure as we would like to, or we should. But that is a constraint which any democratic government faces, how to allocate finite resources.
I just want to close by asking you this. If we come back to India 5 years from now, how will the economy be different?
Oh, India will be a stronger economy. Our reserves would have grown. Our growth rate hopefully would have been maintained at close to 9%. More people would have been lifted above the poverty line. There's no question that today we are much stronger than what we were 15 years ago. I mean, who can deny that?
For centuries, India and China enjoyed roughly the same standard of living. They share a rich entrepreneurial heritage, interrupted first by colonialism and later by socialist central planning. Economist Surjit Bala says there is a natural comparison between the only two countries in the world with more than 1 billion people. The difference now is that China is 3 times richer than India and growing faster. Bala says China embraced free market reforms in the late 80s, but India did not abandon its Stalinist economic model until a decade later.
We were just as bad as them, or just as good as them, depending on your point of view, in terms of economic freedom. We didn't have any. I mean, we were one of the most controlled economies, and indeed today, even today, we are more controlled than China.
Comparing India and China can be a touchy subject. India is proud of its democratic traditions and belief in the rule of law. Even if it slows down development, the poorest slum dweller can still hold up the most massive project by taking the case to court. Indian Commerce Minister Kamal Nath says that is India's strength.
Well, China has its own genius, we have our own genius. China's growth is export market driven. Our growth is domestic market driven. So they're two different models. Really, you can't compare it. We are a market economy. We are a democracy. China is not. So they're two different models altogether. And I really never make these comparisons. I never say it's India versus China. It's India and China.
India's growth is also driven by world-class, homegrown entrepreneurs. Its stock market is open and transparent, the banking system stronger than China's, and India's companies are used to the pressure of public shareholders. China's economy is still largely state-controlled, fueled by an undervalued exchange rate.
I believe what China has done unilaterally on its exchange rate is basically the cause of the global imbalances problem, and it's stealing growth from other developing countries.
Still, there is no denying China has done a much better job on infrastructure. Its highway network is 7 times larger than India's, driven by the decisions of a single centralized government. Political infighting and bureaucracy are legendary in the Indian government. The legal system moves at a snail's pace. Economist Arvind Subramanian says the Indian government is in a race between rot and regeneration, and it's not clear which will win.
In the long run, you cannot have a market economy functioning unless these basic functions that public institutions perform, like protection of property rights, sanctity of contract, all these have to be maintained for a market economy to flourish.
Some analysts argue even India's schools are falling behind China's when it comes to preparing a skilled workforce. Subramanian says top employers like Infosys are forced to pay average wage hikes of 14% a year because they can't keep up with demand.
On the one hand, we've been growing based on skilled labor, but on the other hand, this pool of skilled labor is not as unlimited in supply as people think it is.
Subramanian believes the slow pace of government reform will limit India's growth to around 7% a year, which would still make it a major economic power in just a few decades. But Surjit Bala believes India's young population will allow the country to grow even faster, while China slows down due to international pressure on Beijing to rein in its trade surplus.
Indian growth rate is likely to exceed China's growth rate by 2010, the latest. So in other words, looking forward, what China's been through, India is basically China with about a 5 to 10 year lag.
We have seen tonight that India is dreaming big dreams. To be sure, it is a nation of jarring contrasts. It is poor and it is rich. It is both highly educated and illiterate. But there is a real sense of optimism here that for all its great challenges, India is ready to make good on its great promise. I'm Darren Gersh. For all of us at Nightly Business Report, good night.
Nightly Business Report is made possible by
Franklin Templeton Investments. Our unique perspective helps us see domestic and international markets in a different light. Franklin Templeton Investments. Gain from our perspective.
A.G. Edwards. Objective financial advice can help you build a better nest egg. A.G. Edwards, fully invested in our clients.
This program was made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you. You may order a home video copy of tonight's special NBR program by calling 1-800-535-5864. Please specify the DVD or VHS format.
We are PBS.